What is happening, everybody? Welcome to Off the Rails, a recovery podcast dedicated to ending the stigma of addiction through open discussion on all things recovery related. My name is Mark, and with me always are Dave and Jared. And today we have a very special guest. Dave, take it away.
Yeah, we're extremely excited to have our next guest on here. To be perfectly honest, we don't know if this episode is going to air as a shooting the professional shit or a regular guest interview. As our next guest, in my opinion, has a professional title as it gets. We have Dr. George Photopoulos.
Excellent. You got it right, Dave. Perfect pronunciation.
I may have asked someone for a little bit of help on that, to be honest.
I think I know who you asked.
George, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's my honor and my pleasure, Mark.
So most times when we have guests on, we kind of get them to share a bit about their story. It's your story to share. So whatever you feel comfortable with sharing, by all means, just take it away. So if you'd like to get started,
Sure.
Take it away.
At the risk of sounding boring, I'm not going to do a drunk-a-log of every blow by blow disaster, catastrophe, or awesome stuff. But I'll share the highlights, or at least some of the things that define who George is, right? And first and foremost, I'm an addict and an alcoholic. And my claim date's December the 9th, 2008. I'm addicted to the benzodiazepines, the amphetamines, and the opiates. When I work as a family doc in downtown Toronto, and I'm a proud dad of two incredible young women, Boo Boo and Wee Wee, or Stephanie and Melanie. But Boo Boo and Wee Wee is what I call them. And I'm incredibly lucky to be here tonight, and I'm incredibly grateful. That what I just said, I say every Wednesday when I attend a support group for doctors in recovery that I've been attending for the last 13 and a half years of my life in recovery. But it didn't start there, right? It started where I was born, and it started before I was born. And so I'm the oldest of two brothers, and I grew up in a very poor family, immigrant family from Greece. My dad was a World War II vet, and he was an alcoholic, God bless him. And he married my mom, and she tried to set him straight, and he kept her hostage for most of their lives. So my dad was a cook, and my mom was a cleaning lady, and I have a little brother. He's not little anymore. He's a year younger than me. And we grew up in Parkdale in Toronto, a pretty rough time. Now it's gentrified, but back then it was pretty rough to grow up there. And very poor, like I said, a very simple family. We grew up in the restaurant business. The first half of my career, I've done every job that you can imagine. First half of my life, I grew up washing dishes from a little kid, and went up from there till I started working in other places. Ultimately, my family unit was one that it was a traditional, old-fashioned one. My father was the head of the family. He was a tough guy, and he was, like I said, he was an army veteran. He ran around the back hills of Greece during World War II and a vicious civil war after World War II. So he ran around with a machine gun for literally 10 years, from the ages of 21 to 31. You can imagine that. And as a result of that, he lived like every day was his last day, because it could have been. And that defined him, and that really affected him. And he came to Canada in 1954, and he met my mom, and they got married, and along I came, and then my brother Peter came along about a year after that. And then my mom was like the saint of the family. She took care of the house, and the guys grew up, and it was a pretty rough and tumble place that we grew up in. And at the end of the day, I remember I talk about when did I first drink. I'm an addict and I'm an alcoholic. And basically, I'm addicted to anything that would change my mood and my mind in a very quick hurry. Hey, anything. That's me. I'm addicted to more, right? So if anybody's heard that one before, and more of anything. So the first time I drank 6 beers, and I was 10 years old. And I don't remember much after that, but I know that I drank 6 beers, and my dad gave me permission to drink 6 beers. And what it did for me as I started to grow up was alcohol and later drugs. They basically numbed me out. For me, it was a bit of a social lubricant. I was awkward. My first language wasn't English, it was Greek. And I was kind of embarrassed about my poverty. And a lot of kids would go to camp in school, and you come back from summer, and everybody's talking about the camp. And I went to dishwashing camp, right? I worked in the restaurant and washed dishes for the summer. And that was kind of like a sexy type of story. I never went to camp and things like that. So that made me feel awkward. It made me feel like I didn't belong when I was growing up. When I got a little bit bigger, I got pretty strong, and I became an athlete, and I was a football player. Now there's an opportunity to cause some mayhem, right? As an addict alcoholic, it's the only kind of sport you can have aside from hockey where you can assault people and get patted on the back for, right? So I did that for a while, and I bullied my way through high school with respect to athletics, and then went to University of Toronto. I went to U of T, and when I was there, I played football, and I met my first wife, my daughter's mom, and we fell in love, and we had 2 beautiful little girls. And then a whole bunch of stuff happened. I started seeing how much alcohol and drugs was going on in my life. It was really important for me to drink. I'm a guy, I'm a he-man. Like, I'm one of these traditional guys that you drink and you carry on, and you're not afraid of anything. What I found was alcohol was false courage for me. It made me not afraid. And I can tell you about how I learned. My favorite definition of addiction is a disease of feelings. And my biggest feeling was fear. I was afraid of everything. Anything and everything I'm afraid of. The only difference in recovery now is that I'm aware of it and it's okay. But back then I was afraid to be afraid. So I was a tough guy and big mouth and loud, and I would drink, and it would make somehow things feel easier to do. When I started moving up the ranks in training in university and medical school, there's a big party scene, a big drinking scene. If you don't go out drinking with the guys at any given time, then you're not part of the group and so forth. So it was a little bit of pressure. You didn't have to twist my arm, man. I was one of the first ones there. So I did that. So alcohol was a big thing in my life from a little kid. And I noticed its strength. It changed things for me. It made things more tolerable, less difficult, if I can put it that way. So I got older. I graduated, started working in a clinic. Family started growing up, and unfortunately, I ended up with some marital problems, which ended up in divorce, and that was huge for me. I ended up becoming very, very sad and very, very scared, right? Uh, um, Nobody divorced in my family. And here I am, the oldest of two kids, and I'm supposed to be leading the way. At least that's what I was taught. And I'm not supposed to be afraid. And meanwhile, I'm petrified inside. And I'm also angry, right? And anger is a combination feeling of fear and sadness. I'm either afraid of something or I'm sad about something. Well, I was afraid and I was sad. And for the next 3 years, as a separated man and ultimately as a divorced man, I tried to prove that I'm a guy. And I partied and I practiced high risk behavior, and I lied when the truth would do. And I convinced the world that I was okay. And inside I was dying. Inside I was melting away into nothing. As a football player, had lots of different injuries. I could get a hold of narcotics, right? And it was an easy step. When my family doctor gave me some Percocets, which is powerful forms of Tylenol 3, for my tooth pain or for my wrist arthritis or for my knee problems or my back problems, I quickly discovered that it would also numb my feelings of fear and sadness. And guess what? Didn't take long before I started taking drugs to not feel, not the physical pain, but the emotional pain, right? And so from 1999, when we got separated, until 2002, I went from really not using prescription drugs at all. I never did street drugs, but doesn't matter. I did a lot of prescription drugs, and because I have access to them, or I had access to them. Over those 3 years, I remember it starting. Well, I was a traditional guy. I'd have a couple of beers with barbecue with the girls in the backyard, and the Saturdays would be kind of cool. Maybe a cigar and a little bit of wine and some port on the deck on a Saturday night. It wasn't the end of the world. And then all hell broke loose. And before I know it, I'm abusing narcotics. If anybody knows anything about Percocet, which was one of my drugs of choice, about one Percocet's equal to about 3 to 5 Tylenol 3s of pain control. At the height of my addiction, which lasted from about 2001 or 2 until 2007-8, I averaged, at the height of my addiction, 90 Percocets a day. 90 Percocets a day, 90 Percocets would kill all of us if we all took it right now. But in order to, you can't take that stuff and stay awake, right? So I would take amphetamines to stay awake. Hey, why not? Hey, so I try and use chemicals to numb myself and not feel. I used chemicals to try and get energy for the side effects of the narcotics. And then I'd come home and I couldn't fall asleep. So I'd take some benzos with vodka, right? Of course, because that will help me fall asleep. So I thought I had solved my problem, my emotional problem. Yeah, the world didn't love me. I'm by myself. I don't see my children as often as I think I should. My life is a disaster. My passion of becoming a doctor was out the window. Life was a catastrophe. My practice was disintegrating in front of my eyes. Patients were leaving. I was lying. I was making up for my shortcomings, right? I'd fall asleep, couldn't get up after being awake for 3 days. And it got very dark. It got very bad. My mother died in 2004, and I was in active addiction when she died. That's not great. My dad had died many years before that. So The height of my addiction, I basically used substances to control my feelings and my mood and basically deal with my fear. I was afraid of everything. It was only a matter of time, I truly believe, that I was going to die. I would lie asleep at night. I grew up a Greek Orthodox kid, right? I have no problem believing in God. I'm a big 12-step guy. I go to AA. I believe in abstinence-based recovery. That's what works for me. Okay, I'm not saying that that's the only way to do it, but that's what works for me, and has worked for me. So I'd go to bed and I'd calculate. My life was so terrible at the time. I felt that my life was over. It wasn't worth living. I'd calculate how much medication I should take to overdose and stop breathing, and I'd take it. I'd take it and I'd lie in bed and I'm like, oh no, oh crap. I'm going to overdose. I'm going to die. And automatically I'm thinking, well, if there is a God and if I overdose, that's a sin. I'm committing suicide. I'm going to hell. What am I going to do to save my ass? So what I would do in my fit of madness at that moment is I would take my Bible, true story. I would take my Bible and I planned, well, you know what, if I die with my Bible in my hand, when there's a fight between devil and God, or the angels and the demons over my soul, if they see I have a Bible in my hands as I passed out and overdosed, maybe I'd be spared emotionally or spiritually. That's the battle that I fought when I would on purpose try and kill myself. I did that about 200 times in my active addiction. And I'd wake up in the morning and I'd feel dreadful because it didn't work. And then I'd have to face my life again. That's how bad it was for me. Nothing was great. Everything was crap. It was only a matter of time before I succeeded in what I wanted to do. So what the hell happened? Why am I still here? Well, I co-own a clinic with my best friend, a family doc that I met. We met each other in undergrad at U of T. He's a saint. He's an angel. He's one of my angels. He stuck by me. I wouldn't have stuck by me, but he did. God bless him. And we own this clinic, which has been around for 93 years now in Toronto, which is a huge honor. We had a receptionist, and this receptionist, threw a party, through a Thanksgiving party, and I was supposed to bring the food for the barbecue. The party was supposed to start at 6 o'clock. I showed up at 11 o'clock at night because guess what, right? Like, I'm stoned and drunk and passing out, and I made it 5 hours late. And did the barbecue, people ate, and then I had this huge confrontation with her. She accused me of some things. At the end of the day, she basically reported me to the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario. She saved my life. Since then, I've thanked her a million times, taken her out for dinner, and she saved my life. This was an angel, another angel for me. So she reported me to the College of Physicians and Surgeons, and then the college came calling. And I knew it was only a matter of time before I got busted, because I'd all of this stuff is public knowledge, by the way. I was self-prescribing. I was a catastrophe. They started their investigation in the fall, November-ish of 2007. I lied halfway through, right? I tried to minimize my use, but I knew it was only a matter of time. And Stephanie and Melanie were going with their mom to Florida for Christmas that year. And I had in my possession, during this investigation, I hadn't stopped using yet. So, but I felt the noose getting tighter and tighter around my neck. It was only a matter of time before everybody found out what was going on, before the college did. And Steph and Mal went to Florida, and I kissed them goodbye in the Christmas time of 2007. And in my possession, as any good addict I had a good 2-week supply of my stuff, right? We don't run out of our stuff, right? We keep our stuff. We got to have it around. So I had enough drugs to kill a million people, a ton of people anyway, in my possession. So I locked myself in my condo, said goodbye to my children. And, you know, guys, I don't know what happened. I had all these pills, and for some reason, something came over me in December of 2007. And instead of taking them all, I flushed everything down the toilet. And then, of course, I went through the withdrawal to end all withdrawals. And I'm not going to go get help because I'm afraid, and I've got a big ego, and I've got lots of arrogance, and I'm ashamed. So I sat in that condo and I went through withdrawal over the next 20 days. Benzodiazepine withdrawal can take up to 3 or 4 weeks. Alcohol withdrawal, not so much, right? The first couple of days are dangerous, but I was coming off the benzos. It was like I was on all these drugs, and I can write a book on withdrawal. I went through, I should have been in medical detox, right? I never tell my patients to do this stuff, but that was me. I was afraid, I was ashamed. So I lived. For some reason, I survived that, and the college came along in January, and I was clean for about a week or two completely. And they said, they did their investigation, and they said, you have an addiction disorder. And I'm like, no, I don't. I'm fine. I just stopped everything. And they're like, well, you know what? You don't know anything about recovery. And I'm like, you are right about that. So they basically threatened to suspend me and take my license away if I didn't follow the rules. And the rules for a doctor with an addiction disorder, now it's called a substance use disorder. That's the proper terms for it. Before, I like the word alcoholic and addict. It's more my style, and it hits home. It grabs me because that's what I am. So they said to me, you got to join the Physicians Health Program. The Physicians Health Program is run by the Ontario Medical Association, originally run by a recovering addict, Dr. Michael Kaufman, who's a dear friend of mine now. Lied to him at the beginning too, tried to minimize my use. He saw right through me. They basically wanted me to sign a 5-year contract where they focused on, I had to go to rehab. I had to do a 5-week inpatient treatment program, come out, and then I'd sign a 5-year contract where I would do random urinary drug screens and hair samples for 5 years. I would attend 12-step meetings. I would have a new family doc. I'd have a psychiatrist. I'd have an addictionologist, do all the work in AA. And if I passed through all that and gave up my right to prescribe controlled substances, because those are the things that I was addicted to, then I could have my freedom to practice medicine again. And I did all of that. I was pulled kicking and screaming to Homewood Mental Health Center in Guelph, Ontario. My clean date is December the 9th, 2008. I went through withdrawal the year before, but I was so stubborn, it took them a year to get me to go to rehab. I didn't want to go. Who wants to go there, right? Give me a break. So went there, and that's when my recovery actually started. For the year before that, I was just a dry drunk. I was just not using. I didn't know anything about recovery. I was just white knuckling it the whole time. So I entered Homewood Mental Health Center, not wanting to go, not wanting to be there. Spent 5 weeks there, started to learn about some stuff about recovery, attended my first AA meeting there. And the magic started. I met my second wife there. We didn't start dating until 7 years later. But I'll tell you a funny story. The first day of admission, okay, December the 9th, 2008. Here I am. My life has been blown apart. I'm lucky to be alive, right? They're giving me the second chance. Okay, George, go this way, go to rehab, follow the rules, right? And you got a shot, right? So here I go, and I'm sitting in Homewood, and the day that I get there is the graduation day for all the inpatients that graduate the program. And I'm hiding in the shadows because I'm mortified that I'm in this. I'm like, give me a break. What am I doing there? I'm this, this upstanding doctor of society, and here I am in a mental institution. And I'm embarrassed and I'm ashamed, and I feel terrible. And these people graduate, and the medical director stands up, and this guy's name is Harry Villago, who's now a dear friend of mine too. And Harry stands up and he says to all the people in the crowd, he says, okay, all you guys are inpatients. All you guys are inpatients. Does anybody have any problems with the program? You can speak up now. We have a forum. It's just us. And I'm not going to say anything. I've been admitted for all of 4 hours, right? What do I know about this program? I just want to get out of there. I'm hiding in the back. And I hear this woman's voice. And she's complaining about everything. And she's like, you call yourselves a world-class institution, and you guys are terrible, and blah, 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 and going on. And I'm like, I got to see who this is. And I look down, and I see the most beautiful blonde I've ever seen in my life. And I said to myself, now, George, there's a woman you have to stay away from for the rest of your life. And I married her 7 years later, of course, right? And we did not date when we were there. We became friends very, very mildly. Ultimately, we dated 7 years after discharge, and we had an incredible marriage for a short period of time, but full of life and no regrets about that. But that was a kind of a cool thing. So, graduate, come out of Homewood, start my practice again, start from zero. In fact, it was less than zero. I was in huge debt. I had the remnants of a practice. And I started living a life of transparency and honesty. I sat down with Stephanie and Melanie, and I said to them, I'm never going to lie again. You see, when in active addiction, I'd lie when the truth would do, right? Right? I was afraid of the truth. And I promised them I was never going to lie again, and they would know everything about me. And I started down this path of recovery. I went to meetings. I did all my step work, got a great sponsor, did all the Physicians Health Program stuff, graduated the program, just got out of debt 15 years, like maybe a year ago, some people are retiring, like my younger brother. He's like a normal person. He's like an earth person, my brother, right? He just retired. I'm just starting off, and I'm 58 years old, but I'm grateful to be alive. Now, what does life look like for George? Well, I now work for the Physicians Health Program, and I co-facilitate a support group for doctors in recovery, which I just finished doing an hour ago every Thursday. On Wednesdays, I belong to a Caduceus group that I've been part of for the last 14 years. That's for support for healthcare professionals. I still attend 12-step meetings. I still have a sponsor. I pray. I journal. I help. I never say no for anything in recovery. Now all of a sudden, all these people think I know what I'm talking about. I'm just the guy. I'm just like a regular guy that was lucky enough and was given the gift of recovery. And I live this life now of, I try to be humble and grateful and try and live this life of simple, quiet dignity and transparency. My children are my biggest inspiration, my biggest gift of recovery, my relationship with my girls. I'm the luckiest guy in the world. Should be dead many times. I'm still here. I don't know why. Every time they give me a card, they write down, I look forward to growing up with you. I love you. So I'm kind of growing up with them, eh? So that's kind of cool. I'm very grateful for that. Recovery is not easy. It might be simple, but it's not easy. The steps are pretty straightforward, but they're not easy. It takes a lot of work. And in recovery, what happened to me? Well, it wasn't all smooth sailing. A year and a half into recovery, I had a brain tumor. Should be dead again. Emergency brain surgery, emergency this, that. Given 6 months to live. Hey, that was 11 years ago. Still a full-time member of Princess Margaret Hospital as a patient. So what a great gift that is. Got married again, got divorced, ended up having a major abdominal surgery and lost 2 feet of my large intestine 4 years ago. Should be dead again. Ended up a year after that getting on a boat and getting on a ship and traveling halfway around the world with my wife at the time and being grateful that I could do it in recovery. I got to see my children move in with me ultimately at various stages of their lives while they completed their university. I've made amends to the people in my life, including my first ex-wife, and I've now got some pretty cool relationships with a lot of these people. My practice is full. I now have doctors that are in early recovery being referred to me. How lucky am I? Right? That's where I'm at right now. My goal going forward is to keep doing the next right thing, right? And keeping it simple. I'm a God-fearing Christian, and I read the Bible, and I pray a lot. I tell people I know a few things. I know that I'm not God, and I don't know what God's going to do, but I think it'll be all right, right? So that's my story, guys. Still co-own a clinic in Toronto, and we brought on another associate, and things are heading in the right direction. And I've never been more at peace in my life. I've done a lot of work on my relationships in my life and my relationships with alcohol and drugs. And I've learned about George, more importantly. And then I get this text, this email from Dave going, hey, can you help us out? And I'm like, sure. In traditional AA way, you never say no, right? And I'm incredibly grateful to be here today. So that's my story, and there's lots more, obviously, but that's my Cole's Notes version. You guys are probably too young to know what Cole's Notes are, but it's
Oh, I do.
Do you know, Dave?
Oh yeah, those got me through high school.
There you go.
They're Spark Notes now.
There you go. So
Yeah.
that's the short abridged version of George's life in recovery. And today I'm clean and sober. I still do hair analysis. I don't have to, but I do. I still go to meetings. I still, like I said, have a sponsor. And I try and do as much service work as I can. And I'm just grateful to be here.
George, thank you so much. You did an amazing job. I got several questions. I know the guys probably do as well. the first one I have is, you mentioned addiction being a disease of feelings. So when you like first entered recovery, how were you able to start dealing with your feelings and emotions again?
Not easy, eh? I was afraid. I was angry, and anger is fear and sadness, like I said, Mark. And at the beginning, it was very difficult. One of the best ways that I learned, because I wasn't one of these people that told people how I felt, right? I suffered in silence. And this disease is a disease. This disease is like an isolation thing, right? We isolate when we're in active addiction. And in early recovery, it was very difficult for me to deal with these feelings. And what I'm supposed to do is share my feelings with people. I never learned how to do that, right? And then all of a sudden, now I have all these feelings happening, and I can't numb them. So I sought professional help. I had a psychiatrist. I was put on medication. I did my AA stuff. That was huge. I had a lot of support. A lot of people reached out to me, and they shared their feeling problems. And I wrote. I also journaled a lot. And I went to a psychiatrist for 3 years. At the beginning, twice a week, and it helped a lot. And I needed medication to stabilize my mind and my mood at the beginning, when it was very, 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 very uncomfortable and chaotic and stressful. One thing that I'll tell you, Mark, is that I still am afraid, but now it doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't bother me. I'm now much more aware of my feelings, and feelings for me are these they're these gray, it's not black and white anymore. Before it was either right or wrong. Now it's all this gray stuff. So it's not something that I can actually put in a little box. I have to start to just get used to feeling these ups and downs, and it's okay. But it was self-discovery that I can actually feel. See, before, all I did was exist, and existing is basically just living without feelings, right? So I got help, and I shared a lot. That's what helped my feelings, for sure.
George, I was curious. You mentioned, that first year of being a dry drunk and then going to rehab. Do you remember, was there one thing that stuck out for you when you got to rehab, or was it a group session or anything that you realized, oh, this is the right place, this is where I need to be?
Absolutely. A couple of things happened. On the day of my admission, there was this addiction doctor that admitted me. He's a dear friend of me now. All these guys are my friends now. Back then, I didn't think he was my friend. And he took my blood pressure, and it was like, I don't know, 1,000. I was ready to explode, right? And he goes, "Why are you upset?" And I'm like, "Why am I upset? Like, do you see where we are here? Are you nuts? Like, I'm in a mental institution. It says mental health center. I'm like, this is a disaster." And he goes, "Why?" And I said, and so the reason, let me tell you, it's okay to have humor in all this stuff. And we've learned to laugh and celebrate the happiness of being alive, right? But you got to remember, it was emotional back then. It wasn't very funny to me back then. Now it's kind of funny, right? So this guy says to me, "What are you upset about?" And I'm like, I'm a semi-public filmer. I'm mortified. I'm embarrassed. What would people think? And he says to me, "Since when is it your business what other people think of you?" And I'm like, this guy's nuts. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. I said, of course it's my business what other people think of me. That was the state of my mind at that moment in time, Dave. Now, when I think about it, when he planted the seed that it's none of my business what anybody thinks of me, that was huge for me. Back then, I didn't get it that much. The most emotional thing that happened to me in rehab happened about halfway through. I was in a support group, and the addictions counselor who I related with a lot, because he had 2 daughters, 3 years apart, 10 years older than Steph and Mel. We started talking about parents and relationships, and he reminded me of my dad. And I have this, my dad was my hero. I also inherited his genes, and I have this crazy relationship with him. I love them to death. Yet he, in my opinion, he let me down, and I was afraid of him too. Hey, he beat me, he did all kinds of stuff. And so this guy decides in this group that it's a great idea for me to write a letter to my late father. He says, you got to come clean with your old man. You got to make an amends. You got to set everything clean. So I want you to go back to your room tonight and write a letter to your father. So I did, and I wrote an 8-page letter, and it took like 10 minutes. I didn't think I could write a letter to my father. My father had been dead for more than 10 years at the time. In my group at that time, it was Christmas time. There were 3 women in that group with me. There were 4 of us all together. And one of them is, and they're all dear friends of mine still, of course, now. One was a nurse, another one was an RCMP police officer, and another one was a camera person for Much Music. You remember Much Music? Remember those days?
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, so these younger women were in my group, my little sisters, and here I am, this older guy, and I bring my letter to the meeting, and this guy says, read your letter. I'm like, what? I go, nobody said anything about reading a letter. He said, write it. I'm not going to read this thing. He goes, no, read the letter. And I started reading the letter to my father. And when in those days in recovery, in those circles, I would lean forward and I would get very serious, and I'd hunch over, and I was reading this letter, and with every page that I'd finish, I'd drop it to the ground. I never did that before, but it happened that day. So with every completion of what I was telling my old man at the time, it would fall to the ground, and then the tears would start to drip onto the pages. And I didn't dare look up because everybody would see me, but you could see the tears dropping on the pages. And the 8th page came up, and I'll never forget how I ended it. I said in the letter, I said all kinds of things in that letter, but I ended it with, Dad, I don't know where you are, but I want you to know that I love you very much, and I hope you're okay. And I dropped it to the ground, and then I looked up, and I looked over at these 3 women, and it looked like somebody had drenched them with a bucket of water. They were all crying because they had problems with their dad. And for the first time in my life, I realized I wasn't alone. That there were other people that had a dad that they loved, that they almost worshiped, that was their hero, but they had this horrible relationship with them at the same time. That was huge for me. It meant that I wasn't alone, Dave. And then the addiction counselor said, George, that's a great letter. Now take that letter when you get out of here and go to your father's grave and burn it. And that's what I did.
That's incredible. They had us do a couple letters when we were at rehab too. All 3 of us were there together. And I found for myself, that was a very good process for me anyway, I found doing that. So it's incredible to hear that.
Yeah, that was an incredible answer.
Well, true story. What I found in recovery is I only have to remember one story now.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Do you remember how much energy it would take to remember what I lied about? Oh my God, right? Like it was a disaster. You didn't know what you said to who and how you said it. And now I just have to remember one story.
Yeah, I shared a very similar thing at my last meeting like that. I had another question for you, George.
Sure, Mark.
You mentioned that you never did street drugs, right? And
right.
Was there ever a point in your addiction where you kind of justified your use by like saying that, like, you know, at least I'm not doing street drugs, or was that ever a thing for you?
You know, it's an interesting question. When, as a doctor, we're around medications a lot. We learn about them, and then we see them, and it almost made me feel like they weren't that dangerous. This is how bad my disease is. So I went to U of T medical school. I'm supposed to be smart. I'm supposed to have learned all this stuff, and I'm supposed to know how bad all this stuff is for you, right? Here I am suffering with this disease, and I'm convinced that it's okay for other people to think that it's dangerous, but I know what I'm doing, right? What I discovered is addiction is the only disease in its active form that tells me as a sufferer that I'm okay and the rest of the world is messed up. Nothing wrong with me. When I was in its clutches, that's what it did. So did it make it easier for me? Well, you know, these cute little geometric cylindrical little pills, you know, they weren't like you know, they weren't like, I wasn't hiding in the shadows to get them, although I broke the law to get it. That's the truth, right? Did I justify it? Did I make it think that it wasn't that bad? It's a fabulous, it's an incredible topic, because how ironic that I've got this world-class education and insight into the dangers of these things, yet I'm taking enough to drop an elephant and I don't see the danger, or I don't care. That's how insane this is.
Yeah.
That's exactly where it is. So to me, there's no difference. Street drugs, in my circles in addiction, when I check in, we are always expected to talk about our drugs of choice. What were they? And as I mentioned them at the beginning, others they didn't appeal to me because the stuff I already had, I could have access to. Right? It was there. I could get it very easily.
Guys, I hope you are enjoying this episode as much as we are. George has been an amazing guest, so please make sure to check out part 2, available on all of our platforms.